Welcome back to Hunting the Haunted here on the Paranormal Network, where we dissect and discuss famous, infamous, and not so well-known cases of hauntings, demonic possession, and UFO and Bigfoot sightings. I'm your co-host, Jason Hewlett.
And I'm Peter Renn. On this episode, we're taking a deep dive into the centuries-old story about Headless Skeleton, said to terrify anyone who dares to venture into the Deer Island along the Mississippi.
A quarter mile off the coast of Biloxi, you'll find Deer Island. The tropical treasure is the closest to the coastline of all the barrier islands, yet many residents don't know it's there, which means they are also unaware of its haunted past. Thank you all for watching Hunting the Haunted, and I ask that if you enjoy our shows, please subscribe to our channel right now, like this video, and click on the bell, notified each time a new video goes up. Now back to the show. Not only is the sprawling 400-acre island home to 10 different types of endangered species, it's also said to be home to two of the state's most mysterious entities. Both ghosts were actually documented for the first time in the Sun Herald in a 1922 article by A.G. Ragusin. Before we continue, Peter, there's quite a long tradition of aquatic or marine-based hauntings, isn't there?
Yeah, there has. Over the years, I've investigated quite a few coastal areas of the world, like even from Tasmania in just outside of Australia, all the way from the coast of England and stuff like that, like lighthouses and things like that as well, and over to Vancouver Island. And there's a lot of theories behind it in relation to obviously water producing energy, and that I believe has I believe that has a factor in relation to that as well. But the lot of the investigations I've had prolific evidence from those places, and undeniable evidence as well. And at that time as well, many people that were with me during these investigations actually witnessed the same things that I saw and I've heard, and I actually felt as well.
And that's interesting. And we've even touched on, we want to believe how water can be a conduit, or is believed to be a conduit for paranormal activity or for spirits, right?
Yeah, it's just, it is a theory that we have in the field. Like anything, like what we do is just, we're trying to put bits of a puzzle together. But for me, there is a lot of validity in that, because all of the investigations that I've had around the world to do with coastlines, rivers, sea, and that kind of thing, whenever there's been water close by. Even Harrison haunting that we filmed about last week, that was by the Harrison River, the Harrison Lake. It's all connected somehow. And whether it's not the water that produces the energy, there is something in it. There's a lot of validity in it.
Interesting. Well, back to the article, which recounted the story of two fishermen who were planning to stay on the island overnight. While sitting around the campsite, they heard something moving in nearby bushes. Assuming it was a hog, the men tried to ignore it, but as the sound grew louder, they decided to investigate. As they approached the bushes, they came face to face with a headless skeleton, which began to chase them. The two fishermen were so scared, they ran for the boat, leaving all of their equipment behind. Now, Peter, have you encountered many headless skeletons in your 30-year career as a paranormal investigator? Because this sounds like something out of a William Castle movie.
No, I've dated a few. No, in all honesty, obviously stories like that, a lot of it are based on like myth and stories, folklore stories and stuff like that have been passed around from generation to generation. There has been, various sightings that have come from people that I entrust in the field. Even back home, there's been various accounts of sightings of headless figures. One particular, where local to me, and we brushed upon it one of our previous episodes. Dick Turpin, and he was alleged back in the I think it was the 15th or 16th century, just to go around on horseback and rob people that were going through on horse and cart. And there was a lot of sightings around where I was brought up, and a lot of friends that I know of actually had, clear sightings of him as well. So it does sound kind of theoretical in relation to, a headless skeleton. The first thing I think of is Evil Dead 3. It's just, but you can't kind of count out those kind of things out. Otherwise, we shouldn't really be doing what we're doing. We've got to have that element of belief, because those stories fundamentally got us into this field in the first place.
Well, absolutely. We're drawn to them, right? Stories much like this one here. So who or what is the Headless Skeleton? According to the 1922 article, he's a pirate who met his demise when he volunteered to guard the loot he and his fellow pirates buried. Once he volunteered, the captain had his head cut off and his body thrown in the bushes, which is a total dick move, if you ask me, Peter. This story, like we'd already kind of touched on, has all the makings of an urban legend. Like, it's one of those classic stories that lends itself to telling a ghost story, much like we just were talking about.
Yeah.
It's like a proud tradition from where you guys come from too. I know in the UK, and I think that's where even like the story, like, the Headless Horseman, Ichabod Crane and the Headless Horseman and all that kind of stuff comes from, right? I mean, yeah,
there's a lot of myths, folklore about various sightings to that degree all over the UK, all the way up to Scotland. There's those kind of stories have been obviously validated recently over the last few decades. And they date back to like the early kind of, when stories were first kind of told in the early 18th century, when those kind of things were documented. There was actually one of the investigators that I investigated with back in England. There was allegedly, and it sounds quite funny, up in a place called Cumbria, which is up in the northern part of England, kind of baseline border with Scotland. And there was allegedly a headless dog. A friend of mine, James, moved up there from London, and both his son and daughter witnessed the same thing, this headless dog running outside and in their kind of dirt track, on their dirt track road just outside their house. And he started inquiring with the neighbours, and it was a regular sign, and they kind of they brushed it off as tradition, and they weren't scared of it. It was a part of the culture that had been that story that's been passed on to generation, and everyone's seen it, and everyone's like, nah, it just happens, the headless dog.
As the years passed, several fishermen claimed to have come in contact with the Headless Skeleton, which eventually became known as the Ghost of Deer Island. Many described the same chain of events, claiming they heard something rattling and shaking in the bushes prior to being chased by the headless entity. Stories also mention a supernatural blue light known as the firewater ghost. The mysterious light has been spotted moving across the bay between Biloxi and Ocean Springs, long before the invention of electricity. According to legend, the light is believed to be some type of ghostly guard, patrolling the area with a lantern in his hand. Sounds like a story I heard on an episode of Scooby-Doo. Ghostly lights like this are nothing new though, right, Peter? In fact, you grew up with a ghostly light.
Sounds like it's just dust to me, but
well, they usually are, right?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, no, we don't know what causes that. All we do is put things together and hopefully come up with a solution to it.
And even to have it go across water would make sense too, right? Like, could it have been like ball lightning or something?
Possibly, yeah. Who knows?
It's one of those mysteries that, like, but I think it's a cool addition to this story. It just kind of ties into the whole, Headless Skeleton and then ghostly guard and treasure and all that kind of stuff. Most of the witness accounts date back to the early part of the last century, meaning there haven't been any recent sightings of the Ghost of Deer Island or the Firewater Ghost for that matter. The stories are still very much a favorite piece of lore for the area. What say you, Peter? Do you think the Ghost of Deer Island is true or just a story that has kind of been embraced by the locals?
It's really hard to say. Obviously, if there's credible validation towards those claims, which by the sounds of all reports there was, there was back in the 1920s, there was some, credible sightings and witnesses to that degree. Yeah, I'd say possibly. Having these stories passed around from generation to generation, especially having the nature of the area as well, where it's an island that's not occupied, or a bank of islands that's not occupied by human beings and stuff like that. It adds that kind of mystery glow to it as well. So I'd say possibly. It'll be interesting, put it on our to-do list one day to actually go out there to just put it to the test kind of thing. But then if we do go out there, nothing will probably happen.
That's usually what happens when you go to these places. Where all these
right? It does.
But it does make for a good story.
It does.
A good story, and it has to have started with something. All right, that wraps up this edition of Hunting the Haunted. We'll be back next month with an all-new investigation. Until then, I'm Jason Hewlett.
And I'm Peter Renn. Stay spooky.